Millionaire Bill Maher, who works for Time Warner, Hillary Clinton's 10th largest donor, took the time to Richsplain liberalism to progressives, because according to Bill Maher, if you're one of the people that didn't come out to support Hillary Clinton or who voted for Jill Stein, then you are culpable in handing the election to Donald Trump. Now, to come to this ridiculous conclusion, Bill Maher must not know about how Jill Stein actually took less votes away from Hillary Clinton than Gary Johnson took from Donald Trump, and furthermore, more Democrats voted for Donald Trump than they actually voted for Jill Stein. But let's not acknowledge that inconvenient fact, because Bill Maher right now wants to attack the people who had legitimate grievances with Hillary Clinton and refused to come out to support her in favor of someone like Jill Stein. So this is his message to you in a nutshell.
Go fuck yourselves with a locally grown organic cucumber.
I'll tell you what, Bill. I'll make it a pineapple if it means not voting for the corrupt, lying, warmongering corporate puppet that your bosses donated to. Because it's not just that she was the lesser of two evils, it's that the two options that we were presented with were so evil that we really had no legitimate choice. I mean, you could make the case that Hillary Clinton is actually more right-wing than Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy. She voted for the Iraq War, so You can't seriously make this argument with a straight face unless you're just being disingenuous. And Bill Maher is, in fact, being disingenuous. But before we get into his core argument, I want to take the time to show you how Bill Maher's perception of reality is skewed because he lives in a bubble. He's rich, so to him, in his view, someone who is a right-wing extremist, someone who is a union buster like John Kasich, is worthy of our praise.
You're one of the good ones, so let's really get them on your side and talk about some of the things that you've done and are for. First of all, you supported medical marijuana, and you also expanded Medicaid. A lot of Medicaid, which a lot of Republican governors did not do. You care a lot about the poor. It's part of your faith, is it not? I could see a challenge in the Republican Party for 2020. Would you be up for that?
So what you just saw right there was a so-called liberal trying to encourage his impressionable viewers to support a guy that wants to cut Social Security, cut taxes for the wealthy, cut food stamps, limit collective bargaining, restrict access to safe and legal abortions, restrict voting rights, and basically do all the same things that Donald Trump is currently trying to do. But because he seems nicer, well, according to Bill Maher, he's not as big as a threat as Donald Trump is. But in fact, Bill Maher thinks that John Kasich is such a stand-up guy that he actually wants him to challenge Donald Trump and run for president in 2020. So that way we can replace Donald Trump with someone who will implement the same policies as Donald Trump, but will just be a little bit more nicer to us while doing so. Now, Bill Maher also purports to care about climate change, but John Kasich is someone who fracked the hell out of his state. However, I'm assuming that Bill Maher doesn't have a problem with that since the candidate he pushed for so vocally sold fracking to the world as Secretary of State. But Bill Maher wasn't done praising neoliberal elites just yet, because he took the time to credit Obama for something that Bernie Sanders did.
What Obamacare did more than anything was changed America's view of healthcare, that it's a right.
Yes, Bill, that totally makes sense. The right-wing Heritage Foundation endorsed healthcare policy that was championed by the insurance companies made healthcare a right. So it's no longer the case that since Obamacare passed that people die or go bankrupt. Oh wait, that's still happening. People are still dying and going bankrupt, even if they have insurance, because deductibles are still too high. So it was the case that Obamacare was a step in the right direction, and it did in fact expand coverage, but there are still people left out. So to assume that Obamacare made healthcare a right is factually incorrect. It's just demonstrably false. And to assert that shows that Bill Maher is uneducated about this issue. But I mean, if you believe something like this, well, it only makes sense if your perception of reality is, in fact, skewed, which I'm inclined to believe since you think people that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton are bad people. But speaking of Hillary, let's go ahead and dive into his argument and find out why Bill Maher is so adamant about you falling in line and voting for a candidate that doesn't represent you, that wouldn't have represented you, that his employers donated to. Let's find out why Bill Maher wants you to support Hillary Clinton.
But in the case of Donald Trump, I will say this about 100 days. it does give us enough evidence to ask those liberals who couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary because she was the lesser of two evils, quite a bit lesser, wouldn't you say now? And no, this isn't about reliving the last election or about my great love for Hillary, which never was. It's about winning the next election. And that begins with learning the difference between an imperfect friend and a deadly enemy. Jill Stein said of her electoral rivals, Hillary and Trump, "To me, one is death by gunshot wound, and the other is death by strangulation." Well, I'm sure with Trump in charge and a racist attorney general, there'll be a lot more of both. My dear friend Cornel West said during the campaign, "I think Trump will be a neo-fascist catastrophe and Clinton will be a neoliberal disaster." I don't even know what a neoliberal disaster even means. But whatever it is, isn't it better than a fascist one? Have you people lost your fucking minds? Now, I can't possibly list all of the lies, fuck-ups, reversals, conflicts of interest, and embarrassments Trump has committed in 100 days. I'd have to stop halfway through to shave. But honestly, under Hillary, would we have Attorney General Foghorn Leghorn? Or Montgomery Burns in charge of the EPA? Or Rick Perry guarding the nukes? Would she have a cabinet made up almost entirely of rich, straight, white men? You know, Hillary, she knows quite a few black people. Trump knows 2. I'm sorry, 3. Oh, and we also might have a Secretary of Education who was smarter than a 5th grader. Before the election, Edward Snowden tweeted, "2016, a choice between Donald Trump and Goldman Sachs." Yeah, so what happened? The anti-Wall Street crowd that was too pure to vote for Hillary ended up putting Goldman Sachs people as Trump's top political strategist, the head of his economic council, and our Treasury Secretary, the trifecta. The only people he hasn't hired from Goldman Sachs are Goldman and Sachs. If Hillary was president now, would we be turning the clock back on the one issue for which there is no more time, climate change? Would we be having to wonder if our president's love of dictators foreshadows some kind of coup here? Would anyone have to wonder if she was Putin's bitch? And instead of trying to kick millions off health care to pay for a tax cut for herself, she'd be trying to raise her own taxes to get more people covered. On so many issues, she wouldn't be complaining. It's complicated. Who knew? She knew. She loves complicated. She's a reader. Do you really think if just as evil Hillary had been elected, conservatives would now be in control of the Supreme Court, as they will for decades? Just wait until the 5-4 decisions start rolling in, gutting unions, making it harder for minorities to vote, siding with polluters, overturning abortion rights. Then maybe you'll join me in saying to the liberal purists, go fuck yourselves with a locally grown organic cucumber.
I wonder how many times he practiced saying that in the mirror. So his argument is that, after having Donald Trump for 100 days, quote, those liberals who couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary because she was the lesser of two evils, quite a bit lesser, wouldn't you say now? Absolutely not. Because with the exception of social issues, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are comparable. I mean, look at the foreign policy positions that they both hold. Donald Trump bombed Syria, and then Hillary Clinton insinuated that that wasn't enough. He should have an ongoing bombing campaign of Syria, of Syrian airfields, and she also implied that he probably shouldn't have warned Russia to move their soldiers from the area that they would be bombing, which Donald Trump did, because even though he's dumb, he's not stupid enough to want to start World War III, I hope. So by warning the Russians that he would be bombing a Syrian airfield, he avoided a potential catastrophe. But Hillary Clinton is not in favor of that. She also voted for the Iraq War, pushed for intervention in Libya, and Donald Trump ran as a non-interventionist. Now, I didn't believe him, but if you are a liberal and you are vehemently against war, then you can honestly make the case that Hillary Clinton is not the lesser of two evils based on that argument. So to say that she's quite a bit lesser, no, that's not true. They're still very comparable. And yes, of course, when it comes to the Supreme Court and social issues, she's better than Donald Trump. She's preferable. But that's not everything. What Donald Trump is doing is he's undoing social progress we've made with executive orders. That can be reversed when we elect a progressive president. However, what can't be reversed is more wars that Hillary Clinton obviously wanted to start if she would have been elected. So I just don't buy this argument that Hillary Clinton is much less evil than Donald Trump. That's not the case, and most Americans agree with me and not you, Bill, hence why they didn't come out to vote for her and why she lost. Now, he also brings up Jill Stein's comments saying that the difference between Clinton and Trump is akin to the differences between death by gunshot wound and death by strangulation, and proceeds to show footage of police brutality against African Americans. But by showing that footage, he's proving our point, because Obama was president while these things happened. And I'm not blaming Obama for that, but the problem is that Hillary Clinton pushed for policies in the 1990s that facilitated even more mistreatment of and state-sanctioned violence towards African Americans. Mass incarceration exploded because of policies that Bill Clinton signed into law that were pushed for by Hillary Clinton. I mean, she called them super predators. How could you let that go, Bill, and then honestly tell me with a straight face that she would have stopped all of this?
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
So if Bill thinks that Hillary Clinton would have fought for demilitarization of the police or criminal justice reform, she wouldn't, because her record suggests otherwise. And then in response to Cornel West, he says, I don't even know what a neoliberal disaster means, but whatever it is, isn't it better than a fascist one? Well, sure, if you want to, opt for the more intellectually lazy argument and not do any research whatsoever, because if Bill Maher was paying attention, if he was in the grassroots, he would see how, as we've seen, it tends to breed fascism. So, you don't counter fascism with neoliberalism, because neoliberalism is something that economically strangles populations. And when a population is given crumbs, when they're deprived of economic prosperity, they become radicalized and become more inclined to listen to the ramblings of a demagogue like Donald Trump or Marine Le Pen. So rather than spending the time to take weeks to come up with this segment where you just talk down to peasants, why don't you actually educate yourself? Read a book about neoliberalism and how it devastates democracy. In fact, I'm going to pull out a book and recommend one to Bill Maher. It's called Undoing the Demos, Neoliberalism's Stealth Revolution by Wendy Brown. It's one of the best books you will find on the effect that neoliberalism has on democracy. And I'm actually going to get old school here and read a passage because I think it's really important. So she states, my argument is not merely that markets and money are corrupting or degrading democracy, that political institutions and outcomes are increasingly dominated by finance and corporate capital, or that democracy is being replaced by plutocracy, ruled by and for the rich. Rather, neoliberal reason, ubiquitous today in statecraft and the workplace, is jurisprudence, education, culture, and a vast range of quotidian activity, is converting the distinctly political character, meaning, and operation of democracy's constituent elements into economic ones. So everything's being economized. And she states, liberal democratic institutions, practices, and habits may not survive this conversion. Radical democratic dreams may not either. So neoliberalism is something that literally threatens democracy. And again, we've seen how neoliberalism breeds fascism and radicalizes populations. But Bill Maher is just going to shrug and brush it off. I don't know what that means. Well, maybe if you educate yourself and if you didn't live in your wealthy elitist bubble, then you would be forced to. But I mean, you make enough money where you never have to worry about the impact of neoliberalism because you benefit from it. It doesn't hurt you like it hurts normal Americans, Bill. So you didn't come off as someone who is reasonable. When you made that statement, you came off as someone who is unwilling to educate themselves about the foundations of neoliberalism and how it erodes our democratic institutions. Now, the one argument that I think is probably the most persuasive that I'm willing to actually admit is the Supreme Court argument. The problem is that the makeup of the Supreme Court hasn't officially changed yet, and he's blaming us for that before it even happened. There's still a conservative majority, 5-4, and that's the same way it was when Scalia died. There's a lot of variables that you have to take into consideration. Why not blame Ruth Bader Ginsburg for not retiring? Because there are many calls for her to retire, and I think those calls were legitimate, even though I love Ruth Bader Ginsburg because she's getting older, she's sick, she's not the healthiest, and so if we get stuck with a Republican and, something happens to her, God forbid, then the conservative majority grows. So why would you blame us for that? Why blame the voters? I mean, of all people to blame, why not blame our elected officials? But you blame the voters for something that they really have no control over. But here's one thing I know that won't help anyone. If you truly are liberal, like you claim, Bill, then talking down to us peasants, telling us to shut up and accept the crumbs that have been fed to us by the Democratic Party as you go home to your mansion every night and look down on us from your pedestal isn't going to persuade us. And if Donald Trump really is as big of a threat as you claim he is, let me ask you this question, Bill, because I think this is really important. What did you do to defeat Donald Trump? Did you phone bank for Hillary Clinton? Did you canvass for Hillary Clinton? How many doors did you knock on for Hillary Clinton? This is a serious question that I'm proposing to Bill Maher, because people might think, Mike, that's ridiculous. Well, why is it ridiculous? Because you're rich. You can't actually do grassroots activism to support a candidate that you believe in? If Donald Trump really is the existential threat that you claim he is, why didn't you do more to help elect Hillary Clinton? See, because us Bernie Sanders supporters, we put in the time. We knocked on doors for Bernie Sanders. We made phone calls for Bernie Sanders. We face banked for Bernie Sanders. We did everything we could to get out the word. I posted hundreds of videos on this channel about Bernie Sanders, trying to spread awareness about his campaign, and then it was stripped away from us. So we put in our time to defeat Donald Trump, but you decided to just be lazy and look down upon us. You didn't want to put in time like we put in time because you're an elite. We're peasants, so it's us who should be putting in the effort at the grassroots level, not you. So you claim that Donald Trump is a threat, but again, I want to know, how many flyers did you leave about Hillary Clinton on people's doors? What did you do for her, Bill, other than talk down to us? So, I mean, if you really want to defeat Donald Trump, Bill, like you claim, don't Richsplain to me about how we should fall in line and support the candidate that colluded with the DNC to rig the primary in favor of the candidate that we worked our asses off for. Millions of people gave Bernie their hard-earned cash and put in time and energy. But after the primary was over, when it was rigged against Bernie Sanders, you just looked down on us. You told us to ignore the legitimate problems we had with Hillary Clinton or how she cheated her way through the primaries. That didn't work in 2016, and it won't work in 2020, because that, my friend, is what I would like to call a futile strategy. If it didn't work, talking down to people didn't work before, then certainly that's not going to work again, and if anything, it's going to piss more people off. So this is my ultimate response to Bill, and this is what I got to say to you, Bill, and I'll let you hear it from someone who I used to respect.
Go fuck yourselves with a locally grown organic cucumber.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.